Donald Trump and Xi Jinping oversee the two largest economies on Earth, together generating nearly half of the world's total GDP. While Trump returns to the presidency with the same goal of containing China, he is encountering a more resilient and assertive Beijing than the one he faced during his first term. The original American strategy relied on the assumption that a massive wave of tariffs and technological sanctions would cripple Chinese industrial growth and force significant concessions. A decade later, that isolationist approach has yielded unexpected results, requiring the United States to negotiate with a rival that has successfully adapted to external pressure. This summit was intended to settle bilateral trade disputes. However, that narrow focus has been overtaken by a series of overlapping global events that Washington cannot ignore. The agenda is now dominated by immediate concerns, including the potential for a broader war in the Middle East and the rapid advancement of artificial intelligence. These crises have required a massive commitment of American diplomatic and military resources, leaving the administration distracted as it prepares for its most significant economic negotiation. To understand why the dynamic has shifted, we need to audit three specific global pressure points where China has secured strategic advantages. The first pressure point is the escalating tension between Israel and Iran, which threatens to disrupt shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most critical oil artery. Any disruption to global oil supplies sends American energy prices climbing, fueling domestic inflation at a time when voters are highly sensitive to the cost of living ahead of midterm elections. Washington needs stability in the Middle East to control its own inflation, yet the United States lacks direct diplomatic channels or economic influence to temper Tehran's actions. While Western markets are closed to Tehran, China acts as the exclusive buyer of Iran's sanctioned oil. Because Tehran relies on these sales to stay operational, Beijing holds a unique leverage over Gulf stability that Washington simply lacks. This creates a situation where a U.S. administration, facing domestic pressure over fuel costs, is now looking towards its primary global rival to help secure regional peace. The second pressure point is the physical supply chain. While the United States leads in the design of high-end semiconductors, it faces a significant vulnerability when it comes to the physical manufacturing of that hardware. Most of that production is concentrated in Taiwan. Any regional instability would immediately halt the global supply of chips required for everything from smartphones to fighter jets. Beyond chips lies a more direct bottleneck. This supply chain map for EVs and precision missiles shows nearly every path routing through rare earth mineral processing, a sector concentrated entirely in China. Without access to these refined materials, Western manufacturing faces immediate disruption. American design supremacy only works if the physical components can be built, and right now, China controls the raw materials required to build them. Finally, we must look at the trade war itself. What began as a series of American tariffs meant to isolate Beijing ended up acting as a stress test that reshaped the Chinese economy. Instead of retreating, China adapted by shifting its export focus to Southeast Asia and heavily subsidizing its own domestic tech industry to reduce its reliance on Western components. Beijing also expanded the Belt and Road Initiative, building new trade networks across the developing world that operate independently of the U.S. financial system. While China was diversifying, the U.S. economy was struggling with the high shipping costs and supply chain disruptions that resulted from the very same trade frictions. This shift is reflected in the current delegation. Trump is traveling with top CEOs from Boeing and the agricultural sector, focused on securing large-scale exports to the Chinese market to boost the American economy. The policies intended to make China more dependent on the U.S. inadvertently taught Beijing how to function without American cooperation. We have entered an era of managed rivalry, a period where both nations remain fierce competitors, yet are too economically intertwined to fully separate without mutual damage. This reality has direct consequences for nations like India, which have positioned themselves as the primary alternative to Chinese manufacturing. During the height of U.S.-China tensions, India saw a massive influx of investment as electronics manufacturers sought a China Plus One strategy to hedge against trade risks. But if Washington and Beijing reach a deal to stabilize trade and lower inflation, the incentive for companies to move their operations out of China begins to weaken, threatening India's recent manufacturing momentum. A decade of attempting to isolate China has led to a counterintuitive result: a global economy that is more aware than ever of how much it depends on Beijing.